The lights in the council chamber were too bright. Hyunwoo Park squinted as he walked through the massive doors of Nexus Station's main hall. Behind him, Soo-Jin Lee and Tae-hyun Kim followed quietly. The three humans looked small in the enormous room built for much larger beings. Hundreds of alien delegates filled the curved seats that rose like steps around the central floor. Their eyes, sensors, and other organs watched the human team with what looked like boredom. Some whispered in languages that sounded like music, others like grinding metal. A few made no sound at all, communicating through light patterns or chemical signals. Hyunwoo had been to many meetings like this over the past 5 years. He knew most of the faces here. The tall, crystal-like Velthari sat in their section, their bodies catching and reflecting the bright lights. Their speaker, Kethvara, looked like a living diamond with too many sharp edges. Next to them, the Zephyrians hunched in their heavy armor, their forearms always moving, always ready for battle. Their commander, Thexmol, had scars across his blue-gray skin that told stories of old wars. But today felt different. Hyunwoo could sense tension in the air like electricity before a storm. The usual pre-meeting chatter was quieter. Too many delegates kept looking at the human section with expressions he could not read. Ambassador Park, Kethvara's voice rang, out like breaking glass. The crystal being stood, and the room fell silent. Please take your place. We have important matters to discuss today. Hyunwoo nodded and walked to the human delegation area. It was small compared to the others, just 3 seats at a simple table. No fancy technology, no floating displays, no honor guards. Just 3 humans with basic data tablets and years of experience dealing with beings who thought they were children. Soo-Jin sat to his right. She was young for a military advisor, but her eyes held the calm of someone who had seen real combat. Tae-hyun took the left seat, already pulling up trade reports on his tablet. He looked nervous, which was normal for him during big meetings. Honored delegates, Kethvara continued. We gather today to address a growing concern. The human expansion across our galaxy has become problematic. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Hyunwoo kept his face blank, but inside he felt his stomach tighten. This was not going to be a normal trade discussion. Commander Thexmol stood up, his armor making soft clicking sounds. The humans have spread to over 200 systems in just 50 years. They build settlements on worlds we consider worthless. They work in environments that kill most species. They refuse to follow established colonization protocols. More troubling, added a delegate from the ethereal consortium, her voice like wind through leaves. They form connections with species outside the normal diplomatic channels. They trade with nomads, refugees, and other undesirable elements. Hyunwoo finally spoke. We have broken no laws. Our colonies are on uninhabited worlds or worlds that were considered worthless by galactic standards. We have trading agreements that follow all established protocols. Protocols you ignore when convenient, Thexmol growled. Your people work in radiation zones, deep space mining operations, and asteroid fields. You take jobs others cannot or will not do. You undercut established labor agreements. We work hard, Soo-Jin said quietly. Is that a crime? Kethvara's crystal form shifted, catching the light in new patterns. The issue is not your work ethic. It is your unpredictability. Other species follow patterns we understand. They expand, slowly, carefully, following established routes and methods. Humans spread like a virus. The word virus hung in the air. Hyunwoo felt the mood in the room shift again, becoming heavier, more dangerous. You adapt too quickly, continued a delegate from the Hive Collective, its insect-like features twitching. You learn our technologies and improve them in ways we do not expect. You survive in conditions that should kill you. You form alliances with species we have written off as failed civilizations. Tae-hyun looked up from his tablet. Our trade relationships benefit everyone involved. Galactic commerce has increased by 30% since humans joined the markets. Because you undercut established prices and work in dangerous conditions others avoid, Thexmol snapped. You make other species look weak by comparison. Or lazy, Soo-Jin muttered, just loud enough to be heard. The room erupted in angry sounds, clicking, hissing, harmonic tones that hurt human ears. Hyunwoo raised his hand for quiet, but it took several minutes for the noise to die down. Kathavara waited for complete silence before speaking again. This brings us to today's proposal. The Galactic Council has drafted new accords that will bring stability to our shared space. A holographic document appeared above the central floor. It was huge, hundreds of pages of dense legal text. But Hyunwoo could read the main points clearly enough, and each one hit him like a physical blow. Complete human disarmament within 6 months. All military vessels to be surrendered to Galactic Council forces. Withdrawal from all colonies beyond a 50 light-year radius of Earth. Over 160 human settlements to be abandoned. Restriction of human travel to designated trade. Routes only. No more exploration or independent colonization. Reparations of 5 trillion galactic credits to be paid over 20 years for destabilization of established economic patterns. Human technology sharing protocols. All significant technological developments to be submitted to council review before implementation. The list went on. Each point was designed to turn humanity from an independent species into a managed population. They wanted humans to become workers and nothing more, contained and controlled. These terms, Hyunwoo said slowly, are not a peace treaty. They are conditions of surrender. They are terms for continued peaceful coexistence, Kathavara replied. Humanity has grown too quickly and too unpredictably. For the good of all species, including your own, you must accept limits. And if we refuse? Soo-jin asked. The silence that followed her question was complete. No whispers, no movement, no sound except the quiet hum of the station's life support systems. Vexmall smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Then you will learn why the galaxy was peaceful before humans arrived. Hyunwoo looked around the chamber at hundreds of alien faces. Some looked pleased, others looked sympathetic but resigned. None looked surprised. This had been planned for a long time, probably since the first human colony ship left Earth 50 years ago. We need time to consider these terms, he said finally. Of course, Kathavara replied. You have 72 hours to provide your answer. We understand this is a significant decision. Hyunwoo stood up, followed by his companions. We will return with our response. As they walked toward the exit, he heard Min-ho Choi, their youngest diplomat who had been observing from the back, whisper to Soo-jin, "They have no idea what they have just awakened." The massive doors closed behind them with a sound like thunder. In the hallway outside, Tae-hyun was already activating his secure communicator. "Get me a direct line to Earth," he said. "Priority Alpha. Tell them the children are coming home." Captain Ji-hee-yoon was drinking her morning coffee when the message came through. The communication display on her freighter Soul's Pride showed a simple trade update from Earth Central Commerce. New shipping routes, updated cargo priorities, standard bureaucratic information that every merchant captain received weekly. But Ji-hye had been flying cargo ships for 15 years. She knew how to read between the lines. The message looked normal on the surface. Requests for increased medical, supplies to outer colonies, new mining equipment needed at Kepler 442b, research materials for stations near the galactic rim. But the quantities were wrong. Too much medical equipment for normal operations, too much food for the listed populations, and the delivery schedules were pushed up by weeks. She took another sip of coffee and coded her response. Cargo acknowledged. Route adjusted. Estimated arrival in 36 hours. 3 systems away, on the mining colony of Kepler 442b, Foreman Woo-jin Bae was having his own strange morning. Supply ships had been arriving ahead of schedule for the past week. Instead of dropping off equipment and leaving, they were taking things. Important things. "Sir," his assistant manager approached with a worried expression. "The Earth ship just loaded the last of the quantum drill cores." Woo-jin nodded like this was normal. "Good. Make sure they get the backup power units too. But sir, those are our primary drilling equipment. Without them, we cannot maintain production quotas." "Production quotas are changing," Woo-jin said, quietly. He handed his assistant a data pad. "New work assignments. We are switching to survey and geological mapping for the next few months." The assistant looked confused but took the orders. Woo-jin watched him walk away, then activated his private communicator. "Package delivery complete. Storage facility prepared for transition." On the edge of Zephyrian space, Research Station Commander Yoon-ji Han was deleting files. Her fingers moved quickly across her workstation. copying research data to encrypted drives while wiping the originals from the main computers. 5 years of gravitational wave research, 3 years of exotic matter experiments, detailed maps of hyperspace currents that took her team years to chart. All of it was being packaged and prepared for transport. Dr. Han, her lead scientist, approached. The morning data backup failed. The system says there is insufficient storage space. I know, Yunji replied. We are upgrading our data storage systems. All current research needs to be transferred to portable drives for the transition. Should we inform the Zephyrian Oversight Committee? Yunji looked up from her work. The Oversight Committee has been informed of routine maintenance procedures. They do not need details about data storage upgrades. This was technically true. The Zephyrians had been told about station maintenance. They just had not been told what kind of maintenance. Her scientist nodded and returned to work. Within 6 hours, every piece of research data would be copied, encrypted, and loaded onto the transport ship that was scheduled to arrive that evening. Back on Earth, Admiral Dong-hyuk Lim stood in the orbital command center, watching displays that showed ship movements across human space. To anyone monitoring galactic traffic, it looked like normal commercial activity. Cargo ships moving between colonies, research vessels conducting surveys, passenger transports following established routes. But Bo-Ra Kim, his intelligence chief, knew the real pattern. Evacuation procedures are ahead of schedule, she reported. Outer rim stations will be clear within 48 hours, core colonies within 60. What about the deep space installations? Already gone. The last automated beacon went dark. 6 hours ago. Dong-hyuk nodded. 50 years of human expansion across the galaxy was being quietly reversed in less than 3 days. Every human settlement, every research station, every mining operation, every trading post was being systematically emptied. But they were not just leaving. They were taking everything with them. Every piece of technology, every data file, every resource that made human colonies valuable was being loaded onto ships and transported to new locations. The aliens had made one critical mistake. They assumed humans were like other species, tied to specific worlds and territories. They thought in terms of planets and star systems, of fixed colonies and established borders. Humans thought differently. They had learned to live in the empty, spaces between stars, in asteroid fields and nebulae, in places where other species never looked because they considered them worthless. Dr. Young-Mi Lee packed the last of her personal belongings into a single bag. Around her, the research facility orbiting Wolf 359 was being systematically stripped. Every computer, every instrument, every piece of equipment was being loaded onto transport ships. She had spent 3 years here studying gravitational anomalies. The Velthari thought her research was purely scientific, interesting but not particularly useful. They had no idea that her team had developed new methods of space travel that could revolutionize galactic transportation. Now that research was going somewhere the Velthari would never find it. Dr. Lee, her assistant called out. The transport is ready for departure. Have all the research files been transferred? Yes, ma'am. All data encrypted and stored on isolated drives. The main computers have been wiped clean. Young Mai took Eotis one last look around the facility. Tomorrow, when the Velthari investigators arrived, they would find an empty station with basic life support and nothing else. No research, no data, no clues about where everyone had gone. She smiled and picked up her bag. Time to go home. But home was not Earth. Home was wherever humans decided to make it. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out. Commander Seung Hwan Cho of the cargo vessel. Busan Runner was making his final delivery run through ethereal consortium space. His ship's cargo bays were filled with the last evacuees from 3 human settlements. Busan Runner to consortium control, he transmitted. Cargo delivered, returning to port. It was his last transmission to any alien authority. Within hours, his ship would disappear into the vast emptiness between stars, following routes that existed only in human navigation computers. The aliens had spent decades monitoring human communications, tracking human ships, mapping human colonies. But they had never bothered to map the spaces where humans went when they wanted to disappear. They had assumed that space was empty because their sensors showed nothing there. They never realized that humans had learned to hide in the darkness, to build facilities in places that looked like cosmic debris. to live and work in environments that other species considered impossible. By the time the 72-hour deadline approached, something unprecedented was happening across the galaxy. An entire species was vanishing, not dying, not fleeing in panic, but disappearing with careful precision. Every human installation was being abandoned in perfect order. Every piece of valuable equipment was being removed. Every important piece of data was being erased or taken. The aliens would soon discover that humans had been the invisible foundation of galactic civilization. They ran the maintenance systems that other species took for granted. They operated in the dangerous jobs that others avoided. They had built networks and connections that spanned the galaxy, and now they were taking all of that knowledge and disappearing into the dark. Hyunwoo Park stood alone in the council chamber as the 72 hours expired. The massive room was full again, hundreds of alien delegates waiting to hear humanity's surrender. He walked to the central floor and placed his diplomatic credentials on the podium. 3 simple words echoed through the chamber. The answer is no. Then he turned and walked out, leaving behind 50 years of human diplomacy. The real conversation was just beginning. The first sign that something was wrong came 12 hours after Hyunwoo Park walked out of the council chamber. The industrial world of Tau Ceti II, where humans ran 3 of the largest manufacturing centers in Velthari space, went silent. Foreman. Kyungsoo Park received his final orders at 0600 station time. The message was simple. Protocol 7. Begin immediately. He had hoped this day would never come, but he had prepared for it. Every human worker on Tau Ceti II had prepared for it. They knew exactly what to do. All shifts report to Central. Assembly, Kyungsoo announced over the factory communication system. Mandatory safety briefing in 1 hour. To the alien supervisors, this looked normal. Humans were always holding safety meetings, training sessions, and equipment checks. The Velthari had learned to ignore these routine activities. Within the hour, every human worker in the 3 factories had gathered in the main assembly area. There were over 4,000 of them, representing nearly 15% of the planet's skilled workforce. Kyungsoo stood before them with a heavy heart. These people had built lives here. They had families, homes, friends among the alien workers. Leaving would not be easy. Friends, he said quietly. The children are going home. That was all he needed to say. Every human in the room understood. They had known this might happen someday. The evacuation plans had been rehearsed monthly for 5 years, disguised as emergency drills. The process that followed was like watching a perfectly choreographed dance. Teams moved through the factories with practiced efficiency. Critical equipment was powered down and loaded onto transport vehicles. Computer systems were wiped clean after uploading their data to encrypted storage devices. Specialized tools and machinery were disassembled and packed for transport. The alien workers and supervisors watched in confusion as their human colleagues methodically stripped the factories of everything valuable. When they asked questions, they received polite explanations about equipment upgrades and system maintenance. "Where are you taking the quantum fabricators?" asked Velthari supervisor Keth Nolan, her crystal body pulsing with confused colors. "To the upgrade facility," replied maintenance chief In-Ho Jung, as his team carefully loaded the massive machines onto hover transports. "They need calibration adjustments, should be back next week." But they would not be back next week. They would not be back ever. By evening, the 3 factories stood empty. The buildings remained intact, the basic infrastructure was undamaged, but every piece of advanced equipment was gone. Every computer was wiped clean. Every human worker had vanished. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. On the mining station orbiting Proxima Centauri, shift supervisor Hai Jin Ko activated emergency evacuation procedures. To the alien administrators, it looked like a response to a radiation leak in the lower tunnels. Standard safety protocol required evacuation until containment teams could assess the situation. The containment teams never came. Instead, human workers systematically removed every piece of mining equipment, every data storage device, every tool that made the operation profitable. When the evacuation was complete, the station was empty except for basic life support systems. Deep space monitoring stations began going offline one by one. The Zephyrians first noticed the problem when their long-range sensors lost contact with Listening Post Alpha 7 near the Galactic Rim. Commander Thexmal dispatched an investigation team, but they found only an empty station drifting in space. All equipment had been removed. All databanks had been wiped. The station's hull was intact, life support was functional, but there were no signs of struggle or violence. It was as if the human crew had simply packed up and left. Find them. Thexmal ordered his intelligence officers. Track their ships. No one disappears without a trace. But tracking human ships proved impossible. Their vessels had scattered in dozens of different directions, following routes that led nowhere on any known star chart. Some headed toward the galactic rim, others toward dense nebulae where sensors could not penetrate. A few seemed to fly directly into empty space between star systems. Dr. Youngmi Lee's research facility orbiting Wolf 359 was next. Velthari investigators arrived expecting to find valuable gravitational research data. Instead, they found corridors, filled with nothing but air. The facility's central computer greeted them with a cheerful message. Welcome to Wolf 359 Research Station. All current research projects have been completed and archived. Thank you for visiting. But the archives were empty. Every data file had been erased. Every piece of research equipment had been removed. Even the coffee makers in the break rooms were gone. Kethavara assembled an emergency council session 3 days after the human ultimatum expired. The crystal being's usually calm demeanor showed cracks of stress as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Over 200 human installations have gone dark, reported a Hive Collective intelligence analyst. No distress signals, no signs of violence, no evidence of forced evacuation. They simply disappeared. What about their ships? Demanded Thexmal. We must have tracking data. Negative. Human vessels scattered using flight plans that do not correspond to any known destinations. Long-range sensors lost contact with all of them within 48 hours. The magnitude of the situation began to sink in. This was not a panicked evacuation by a primitive species facing superior force. This was a carefully planned operation that had been prepared for years, maybe decades. How is this possible? Kethavara asked. How does an entire species coordinate such an evacuation without our intelligence networks detecting it? The answer was becoming clear, though none of the aliens wanted to admit it. Humans had been planning this for a very long time. They had built backup systems, alternative communication networks, and contingency plans that operated completely outside alien monitoring. But the real shock came when the economic impact began to show. Communication relays between star systems started experiencing failures. These were networks that had run perfectly for decades, maintained by human technicians who knew exactly how to keep them operating. Trade routes that had been efficient and profitable suddenly became slow and expensive. The human logistics networks that coordinated shipping schedules, cargo transfers, and supply distribution were gone. Alien companies scrambled to fill the gaps, but they lacked the experience and knowledge that humans had accumulated over 50 years. Manufacturing centers across the galaxy reported critical shortages. Components that had always been available were suddenly impossible to find. Production lines that had run smoothly for years began shutting down as specialized human operators disappeared. Even basic systems started malfunctioning. Power grids, water treatment facilities, atmospheric processors on colony worlds, all of them had human technicians who understood maintenance procedures that other species had never bothered to learn. The Ethereal Consortium sent ships to investigate human agricultural stations that supplied food to dozens of worlds. They found empty greenhouses and abandoned farming equipment. Crops that required careful tending began to die without human agricultural specialists who understood their complex growing requirements. Captain Seung-Hwan Cho made the final human transmission from the Outer Rim. His cargo vessel Busan Runner was carrying the last evacuees from the frontier settlements, thousands of humans who had spent their lives working in the most dangerous and isolated parts of the galaxy. Busan Runner to Galactic Traffic Control, he transmitted on open frequencies. Cargo delivered, returning to port. It was a standard message that commercial pilots sent thousands of times every day, but for humans, it was a farewell. Traffic Control waited for the Busan Runner to arrive at its registered destination. Days passed, then weeks. The ship never appeared at any known port. Long-range sensors lost contact somewhere in the vast emptiness between star systems. The alien coalition slowly realized they were facing something unprecedented. An entire species had disappeared from known space, taking with them the infrastructure, knowledge, and skills that had become essential to galactic civilization. They had not been driven away by superior force. They had not fled in terror. They had simply decided to leave, and they had done it so completely that it was as if they had never existed, except for the empty factories, the silent monitoring stations, and the growing chaos as systems failed across the galaxy. The aliens had wanted to contain humanity, to control their expansion and limit their influence. Instead, they had learned how much they depended on the species they thought they could easily dominate. The stars had not grown silent because humans were gone. The stars had grown silent because humans were listening. 3 months after humanity vanished, the galaxy began to adapt. Trade routes were reorganized using alien logistics companies. Manufacturing was moved to facilities owned by established species. Communication networks were rebuilt with Velthari, crystal technology, and Zephyrian military protocols. It was expensive and inefficient, but it worked. The alien leaders told themselves that they had been too dependent on human services anyway. This forced independence would make them stronger in the long run. Commander Thexmol stood on the bridge of his flagship, reviewing patrol reports from the Galactic Rim. His fleets had been searching for human settlements for months without success. A few abandoned outposts had been found, but they were empty shells with no clues about where their inhabitants had gone. "Sir," his communications officer approached. "We have lost contact with Patrol Group 7. Thexmol looked up from his reports. "Equipment failure?" "Unknown, sir. They were investigating energy readings near the Helix Nebula. Their last transmission was routine navigation data, then nothing." "Send rescue ships." "Already dispatched, sir. Patrol Group 4 is en route. The rescue never came." Patrol Group 4 also vanished near the Helix Nebula, disappearing as completely as the ships they had been sent to find. Captain In-Soo Park watched the search and rescue fleet from the bridge of his stealth vessel, Ghost of Soul. The Zephyrian ships moved in standard military formation, their sensors scanning space for any sign of their missing patrol groups. They would not find anything. The wreckage had been cleared away months ago, recycled into raw materials for humanity's growing shadow fleet. "Target lock acquired," reported his weapons officer. "Wait for my signal," In-Soo replied quietly. Around him, the bridge crew worked with calm efficiency. No dramatic speeches, no war cries, just professional soldiers doing a job that needed to be done. The Zephyrian fleet jumped out of hyperspace directly into the trap. Human ships emerged from the nebula's electromagnetic interference like ghosts, materializing from fog. They had been waiting for weeks, hidden in the dense gas clouds where alien sensors could not detect them. The engagement lasted exactly 17 minutes. The human ships moved in patterns that made no sense to Zephyrian tactical computers. They attacked from directions that should have been impossible, fired weapons from ranges that should have been ineffective, and disappeared back into the nebula before return fire could be coordinated. When the battle was over, there were no survivors to report what had happened, no debris to analyze, no evidence that a battle had even taken place. In-Soo watched the last Zephyrian ship explode in silent flames, then activated his communication system. Ghost of Soul to command, package delivered, moving to next position. Similar attacks began happening across the galaxy's edge. Velthari research convoys investigating gravitational anomalies encountered Admiral Haewon Choi and her task force. The crystalline being's energy shields, so effective against known weapons, proved useless against kinetic projectiles fired from directions their sensors could not track. The Velthari had always relied on their analytical abilities to predict enemy behavior. Their crystal minds could process thousands of tactical possibilities in seconds, calculating the most logical response to any threat. But human tactics were not logical. They attacked when retreat made more sense. They defended positions that had no strategic value. They used weapons in ways that violated basic military doctrine. Dr. Keth Nolan, the same Velthari supervisor who had watched humans evacuate the Tau Ceti factories, found herself commanding a research vessel that came under attack near the Horsehead Nebula. "Sensors detect multiple contacts," her science officer reported. "Configuration unknown. They appear to be using some form of stealth technology." "Impossible," No known species possesses stealth capabilities that can defeat our detection systems. The first missile impact proved her wrong. It came from a direction where sensors showed empty space, hitting the research vessel's main engine with pinpoint accuracy. "Return fire," Keth Nolan ordered. "At what target?" "Sensors show no enemy vessels in range." The second missile took out their communications array. The third disabled their weapons. By the time the human ships decloaked, the Velthari research vessel was completely helpless. Haewon Choi's voice came over their emergency frequencies. "Velthari vessel, you are ordered to abandon ship. You have 5 minutes." "This is Dr. Keth Nolan of the Crystalline Research Collective. By what authority do you attack civilian vessels?" "By the authority of a species that was told to surrender or face the consequences. You have 4 minutes." Keth Nolan looked around her bridge at crew members who had never experienced combat. These were scientists, not soldiers. They had come to study cosmic phenomena, not fight a war they did not understand. "Prepare the escape pods," she ordered quietly. The Velthari crew was rescued by their own ships 3 hours later, drifting in emergency pods near the nebula's edge. Their research vessel was gone, along with years of accumulated data about human activities in the region. But the most disturbing discovery was yet to come. Engineer Jin-A Song put the finishing touches on humanity's greatest achievement, hidden deep inside a hollowed-out asteroid drifting in the empty space between star systems. The construction project had taken 5 years to complete, built entirely, in secret using materials and equipment that aliens thought had been destroyed or lost. What looked like cosmic debris from the outside was actually a massive shipyard, powered by quantum energy taps that generated no detectable signatures. "Final systems check complete," Jin-I reported to her supervisor. "Production facility is ready for full operation." Around her, the asteroid's interior hummed with activity. Assembly lines stretched for kilometers through chambers carved from solid rock. Automated systems worked around the clock, building ships designed with 50 years of accumulated knowledge about alien weaknesses. This was not the only facility. Dozens of hidden shipyards operated throughout the dark spaces between stars, each one producing vessels that existed nowhere in galactic databases. Humanity had been building not just ships, but an entire shadow civilization in places where other species never looked. The aliens had made a critical error. They assumed that controlling inhabited star systems meant controlling space itself. They had never considered that the vast emptiness between stars could be colonized, that asteroid fields could be turned into cities, that nebulae could hide entire fleets. Commander Thexmol finally began to understand the scope of his problem when intelligence reports arrived from across Zephyrian space. Patrol fleets were disappearing at an increasing rate. Supply convoys were being attacked by ships that matched no known designs. Listening posts reported strange energy readings from regions that should have been empty. "How many ships have we lost?" he asked his staff officers. 47 vessels in the past month, sir. No survivors, no distress calls, no debris fields." "And our intelligence networks?" "Compromised. Every attempt to infiltrate human communication channels has failed. They appear to be using encryption, methods that our computers cannot break." Thexmol stared at the tactical display showing the locations of recent attacks. There was no pattern that made sense, no strategic logic that explained the human behavior. That was when he realized the truth. The humans were not trying to conquer territory or capture resources. They were not fighting for planets or star systems. They were hunting, picking off alien ships one by one, studying their technology, learning their weaknesses, and disappearing back into the darkness before retaliation was possible. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we are receiving a transmission on all frequencies, source unknown. Put it through." A human voice filled the bridge, calm and professional. "Attention, Zephyrian forces. This is Admiral Sungmin Kwan of the Human Defense Fleet. You are trespassing in restricted space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Thexmol looked at his tactical display. His flagship was surrounded by 47 of the most advanced warships in the Zephyrian Navy. He was in the middle of his own territory, protected by military installations that had defended this system for over a century. "Human vessel, you are outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender immediately." The response came with what sounded like amusement. Commander, you still do not understand. We are not outnumbered. You just cannot see us yet. The lights went out on every Zephyrian ship simultaneously. Emergency power kicked in seconds later, but the damage was done. Every weapons system, every sensor array, every communication device had been disabled by something that bypassed all their security measures. When the lights came back on, space around the Zephyrian fleet was filled with human ships. They had been there all along, invisible to sensors, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. Now you see us, Admiral Sungmin's voice continued. But this is not an attack. This is a demonstration. We could have destroyed your fleet before you knew we were here. Instead, we chose to disable your systems and prove a point. What point? Thexmol asked, his voice barely steady. That the galaxy is much larger than you think it is, and in the spaces between your stars, humans have learned to live, to build, and to hunt. The human ships vanished as quickly as they had appeared, disappearing back into the darkness between stars. But their message was clear. 1 year after humanity disappeared from known space, the galactic economy was falling apart. Speaker Kethvara stood in her crystal chamber on the Velthari homeworld, watching reports flow in from across their territory. Power grids were failing on 17 colony worlds. Manufacturing centers were operating at 60% capacity. Trade routes that had been profitable for decades were now losing money. The other council species were facing similar problems. Zephyrian military commanders reported that 40% of their patrol fleets had been destroyed or disabled by unknown attackers. Ethereal consortium trade ships refused to travel without heavy escort, making commerce expensive and slow. The Hive Collective's mining operations had ground to a halt without human technicians who understood the complex machinery. We need to bring them back, admitted Thexmol during an emergency council session. The Zephyrian commander looked older than his years, worn down by months of losing ships to an enemy he could not see or predict. Whatever it takes. Our civilizations cannot survive without their expertise. Agreed, said the ethereal representative, her voice carrying undertones of desperation. Our atmospheric processors on 12 worlds are failing. Only humans understood how to maintain them properly. Without repairs, those colonies will become uninhabitable within months. Kethvara processed the data with her crystal mind, analyzing thousands of economic reports, military assessments, and infrastructure surveys. The conclusion was unavoidable. In trying to control humanity, they had discovered how much they depended on human knowledge and labor. Very well, she announced. We will broadcast a message on all frequencies. The Galactic Council seeks renewed dialogue with the Human Federation. The message went out across the galaxy, transmitted on every communication network, every emergency frequency, every channel that had ever carried human voices. It was a simple request for negotiation, offering to discuss new terms for peaceful coexistence. For 3 days, there was no response. Alien leaders began to worry that humanity had moved so far away that they could no longer receive transmissions from known space. Then every screen, every speaker, every communication device in the galaxy activated simultaneously. The response did not come from a single source. It came from everywhere at once, as if the galaxy itself was speaking. Admiral Sungmin Kwan's voice echoed through the council chambers on Nexus Station, through military command centers on a dozen worlds, through civilian communication networks that should have been secure. You offered us a choice, his voice resonated with calm authority. Become your subjects, or face destruction. We chose a third option. Become the night between your stars. Speaker Kethvara's crystal form flickered with shocked patterns. How were humans broadcasting on their secure networks? How had they gained access to communication systems that were supposed to be impossible to hack? The answer came as the transmission continued. Dr. Mi-Young-ha appeared on screens across Velthari space, her image clear and steady despite broadcasting from an unknown location. For 50 years, you watched us build colonies on worthless worlds, she said, displaying holographic data that showed the true scope of human expansion. You thought we were scavengers taking what you did not want. You never realized we were studying your technology, improving your designs, and solving problems. You did not even know you had. The display showed technical blueprints that made Velthari scientists gasp in recognition. These were improvements to their own crystal-based energy systems, modifications that increased efficiency by 300%. Humans had understood Velthari technology better than the Velthari themselves. Colonel Jae Sung Lim's voice joined the broadcast, speaking directly to Zephyrian military channels. Your communication codes were broken 20 years ago. Your tactical databases have been copied and analyzed. Every military exercise, every strategic planning session, every classified operation, we have been watching and learning. Military. Commanders across the galaxy realized with growing horror that their most secret communications had been compromised for decades. Human intelligence networks had been operating inside their governments, their armies, their research facilities. But the most shocking revelation came when Admiral Sung Min appeared on the main display, speaking from the bridge of a massive vessel that dwarfed any ship in the galactic database. The new Sol is one of 47 deep space carriers built in the darkness between your stars, he announced. Behind him, the ship's bridge was filled with humans working at stations, equipped with technology that surpassed anything the aliens possessed. Each one carries a fleet of vessels designed with 50 years of studying your weaknesses. The camera view shifted to show the ship's exterior. The new Sol was enormous, easily 5 times the size of the largest Zephyrian dreadnought. Its hull was covered with weapons and defensive systems that incorporated technology from every major galactic species, improved and refined by human engineering. How? Kethavara asked, though she knew the transmission was not interactive. How did you build such things without our knowledge? The answer came from engineer Jin-A Song, broadcasting from one of the hidden asteroid shipyards. You controlled the planets and star systems where people live, but you never thought to explore the spaces where no one wanted to live. Asteroid, fields, nebulae, the empty regions between stars. That is where humans built our real civilization. The display showed images that made alien viewers question everything they thought they knew about space. Massive cities built inside hollowed-out asteroids, their interiors filled with parks, factories, and homes for millions of humans. Mining operations that had turned entire asteroid belts into raw materials for construction. Research facilities, hidden in nebulae where the electromagnetic interference made detection impossible. Humanity had not disappeared from the galaxy. They had moved to the parts of the galaxy that other species considered worthless or impossible to inhabit. Dr. Young Mi. Lee's image appeared next, speaking from what looked like a massive research complex built into the core of a dead planet. Every piece of technology you depend on was improved by human engineers. Every system you consider essential was designed or modified by human experts. We did not just maintain your civilization, we built it. The truth hit the alien leaders, like a physical blow. For 50 years, they had thought of humans as useful servants, good for dangerous jobs that other species avoided. They had never realized that humans were the hidden architects of galactic society. Trade routes, communication networks, manufacturing processes, agricultural systems, mining operations, power generation, all of it had been designed, improved, or maintained by humans working behind the scenes. Speaker Kethavara finally found her voice. What do you want? Name your terms for returning to civilized space. The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. When Admiral Sung Min finally responded, his words carried the weight of an entire species that had been underestimated. For too long, we don't negotiate with those who mistake patience for weakness. The galaxy is vast, and there is room for all of us, as long as you remember that the dark between stars is where humans live now. The transmission showed images of human settlements that had been built in the past year. Massive space stations orbiting rogue planets in deep space, cities built into the hearts of giant asteroids, research facilities hidden in the gravitational shadows of black holes, manufacturing centers that existed in the empty space between galaxy arms. Humanity had not just survived their exile. They had thrived, building a civilization that existed entirely outside the boundaries of known space. You wanted us contained to our home system, Admiral Sungmin continued. Instead, you have made us masters of the void. Every communication you send passes through space we control. Every trade route you use crosses territories we monitor. Every ship that travels between your worlds does so because we allow it. The final revelation was the most devastating. Captain Ji-hai Yoon appeared on screen, standing in what looked like a massive command center filled with displays showing every major star system in the galaxy. "We never left," she said simply. "We are still here, watching, listening, maintaining the systems you depend on. The difference is that now you know we exist." The displays behind her showed real-time data from across the galaxy. Traffic patterns, communication intercepts, economic reports, military movements. Humanity had been monitoring galactic civilization from the shadows, invisible but always present. "Try to follow us into the dark," Admiral Sung-min concluded, "and you will learn why Earth's children were always meant to inherit the void." The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, alien leaders sat in stunned silence, trying to comprehend what they had just learned. They had not driven humanity away. They had forced them to reveal their true nature. For 50 years, humans had been content to work within the established order, taking jobs others did not want, living on worlds others considered worthless. Now they controlled the spaces between, civilizations, the dark territories that connected every inhabited world. They had become the guardians of the void, the watchers in the darkness, the invisible force that kept galactic society functioning. The stars had grown silent because humanity was listening. And in that silence,